It was the spring of 1788 in France, and this type of encounter does not happen without the mystery preparing the stage. Recent rain had cleaned the streets. Although the weather seemed undecided, there was this sweet smell of newly opened flowers, but also a cold dampness that clung to clothes as if trying to prevent any movement. Paris seemed suspended between seasons, as if time was taking a deep breath before changing to something we dared not predict. The street where everything happened was old, narrow, with windows that recalled centuries. The cobblestones glistened from the rain that had fallen moments before. I was walking with a letter in my hands, an unsigned letter, written on paper that seemed not to age. It dictated a date, an address, and just one thing. Go up to the second floor. The rest will be revealed to you. Nothing more. I followed the instruction. The building was narrow, with stairs creaking under the weight of many who came before me. On the second floor there was a cozy room, a space that mixed laboratory and library, with old vials, scattered papers, and an open volume of Paracelsus on the table. The place was empty, silent, and I really thought someone was about to arrive. I smelled the perfume. It was something I supposed to be oriental. An unknown flower that seemed too old to exist in modern bottles. The light in the room changed, subtly, as if acknowledging someone's presence. And then I understood I was no longer alone. He was there, not walking, not entering through any door, not coming downstairs. Simply he was the Count of Saint Germain. It was as if his presence did not occupy space. It redefined space. The room, the wood, the light, everything seemed to have been molded to receive him. I don't know how long I remained in silence. The air became different. I saw a composer. That was not simply the nobility of a count, but the majesty and dominion of one who feels master of his own karma. A luminous aura seemed to envelop him, preventing aging, as if time was incapable of scratching his skin. He said you came as confirming something already decided by time. I tried to speak, but the words slipped away like water through my fingers. He walked to the table with the book by Paracelsus, or rather, glided, with the lightness of one who does not depend on the ground. I approached to ask something, but before my voice could emerge, I saw his expression change. First, his eyes lost their brightness. Then his entire body became immobilized in an almost supernatural way. He entered an instant trance. I knew from the stories that he was capable of remaining like this for 36 or 48 hours, and that from these states he returned knowing whatever he needed to know. But that afternoon, it was seconds. When he breathed again, his eyes were different. He had seen something, he murmured. The shadows move before the century turns. And then, as if nothing had happened, he sat down at the table. He separated two identical pieces of paper and said, "Observe, because this will stay with you." He picked up a quill in each hand and began to write using both hands on both sheets at the same time, writing approximately halfway down each of the sheets. I didn't believe it could be real. Even seeing it with my own eyes, it was impossible. I exclaimed, "This is magic." He merely smiled, that smile that did not belong to our time. When he finished, he placed the 2 sheets before me, and, with his deep, calm voice, he said, "Choose one of these sheets for your collection of autographs. Hand the other one over to Angelo, companion of the Prince of Liechtenstein." Everything seemed prepared not to impress, but to teach, or perhaps to warn. I must admit, my hands were trembling when I touched the papers. On the sheet I chose there were verses, pure poetry, charged with an ancient magnetism that only exists in texts touched by the hand of an adept. On the other sheet, I found out later, there were diplomatic instructions with absolute precision. He then walked to the window and looked out at the silent street and said, "Now I depart to Constantinople, and then I will go to England to lay the foundations there for 2 inventions that humanity needs, trains and steamships." He spoke naturally, like someone commenting on something already completed. He turned to me, his eyes reflecting centuries, and said, "Astronomers and historians know nothing. It is true. They should have studied, as I did, in the pyramids." At this point, the air in the room vibrated, and he continued saying, "At the end of this century, I will disappear from Europe and go to the Himalayas region, where it is necessary for me to rest." His words sounded like a sentence, like a prophecy, like a farewell. Then a clap of thunder violently cut the sky. The window trembled, and when my eyes sought the Count, he was no longer there. No steps, no sound, no shadow fleeing. He disappeared as if reality had blinked for an instant. I already knew what the world said about him, but on that day I understood what the world never did. He was a polyglot. He spoke French, German, Italian, Spanish, Russian, Swedish, Danish, and Oriental languages, as if he were born in each of those countries. A musician. He played all instruments, but his favorite was the violin. It was said he could rival Paganini. He was an alchemist who manufactured perfect gold and diamonds, an adept of Hindu and Egyptian hierophants. A man who read closed letters without touching them. He went through doors without opening them. He slept 4 days in prophetic trances. A presence who was never seen eating or drinking. A connoisseur of alchemical truth. He was extremely wealthy. He gifted all his friends with magnificent and extravagant jewels, and possessed a memory that no mortal has. A counselor to kings and queens. If they had followed his advice, the books would have recorded another history without the horrors of wars. But there was something that always haunted the Count, something that not even his wisdom could avoid. Human persecution. It was inevitable, they say. And maybe it was, because a being like him, so different, so vast, so Unate could not walk among men without provoking astonishment, envy, and fear. Thus, it was natural that he accumulated enemies. They slandered him to the limit. They invented stories, spread rumors, distorted his words. They made lying a daily job. Western writers, many of them could not bear the idea that someone could be above their books, their theories, their fragile certainties, and it wasn't just him. The world has always treated in the same way all those who, after long years of seclusion, return trying to illuminate a little of the darkness of others. Above all, Saint Germain was the greatest adept Europe had seen in centuries, but few recognized him. They say he died in 1783. They say, but he was seen in 1785 talking to the Empress of Russia. He was seen in France in 1793. Then in Russia again, and far beyond that, among the mountains of the Himalayas. Dead. No. Just invisible. Some beings do not die. They just change places and await the moment to return. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and continue with us on this journey.